For content warnings and a written version of this chapter, please check the description below. This is the second chapter of Serving 1 of A Doughnut from Cakeopia and is titled, What Do You Want? To support me in general life with my rent and things, please consider donating to my Cash App. The cash code is on the screen and will be linked in the description. And if you want to directly help towards my transition goal of getting nullo, please consider donating to my GoFundMe. The link is also in the description. Now on to the story. The painting of her father looks back at Victoria. The woman could almost feel the warmth of her father, Sponge Cake, as if he were in the room standing before her. He wasn't. Instead, he was a painting decorating an empty piece of wall. Victoria reached out a hand, wanting to touch the portrait, but recalled it, changing her mind. Footsteps neared the portrait room, and the butler, Tarty Tattin, entered nervously. His golden face glistened as the crack of light from the door he entered through reached into the dimly lit room. "What do you want?" Victoria demanded, not turning her head to the man, who looked like he was sweating from the lights that caressed the apples on his face. "A Doughnut is here to see you, ma'am," he claimed nervously, unsure whether to step further into the room or not. Victoria waved her hand dismissively. "Send him away. I have no time. I have no business with that today." Tarty Tattin stood awkwardly in the doorway of the room, causing Victoria to turn her head angrily. "Well, what is it?" she snapped at her servant. He says he wants to leave Cakeopia." Tarty Tattin turned his head sharply so he didn't have to look into his mistress's rage-filled face. Victoria gasped and quickly stormed towards the door of the portrait room, pushing past her servant. Her large bell-shaped dress caught on the door, and she used her hands to comically push herself free of the door frame. After a moment of frustration, she popped out of the door like a cork popping out of a bottle. She then quickly ordered Tarty Tattin to fetch the doughnut and bring him to her small lounge. Victoria had her own seat. She sat awkwardly patting down the fabric of her large white bell-shaped dress, which could have easily been mistaken for a wedding dress, ordained with accents of red lace, sitting delicately above its frills. Deciding sitting wasn't the best option, the woman stood dramatically and bent down to collect her small porcelain teacup and saucer. She stood before a large fireplace, the warm glow of the orange dancing around her dress, making Victoria look as if her soft golden sponge skin was itself aflame. Deep shadows formed around her bright red eyes, where the light didn't reach. SJ looked up from the small chair he had been asked quite forcefully to take a seat on. He was looking at a demon. "Do you have some tea?" Victoria encouraged in a forced sweet tone, which wouldn't convince even the sweetest of creatures. SJ nervously collected his cup, trying to squeeze his large finger through its tiny handle. "So I hear," Victoria began before placing a cup to her strawberry-red lips, which darkly stood out against the light dusting of icing sugar on her skin. "You want to leave Cakeopia?" She narrowed her eyes, removing the now lipstick-stained porcelain from her lips. After taking the daintiest of sips, SJ nodded, unsure how to respond. Victoria placed her cup and saucer back down before placing her hands together in front of her dress to form a V shape, giving her the appearance of an angel. "Why?" the woman asked warmly with only a hint of ice. "I don't feel I belong in Cakeopia," SJ responded, shifting on the small pink cushioned seat, letting sugar flutter all over it as if it were itself a cake being dusted. Victoria ignored the mess the doughnut was making. She knew all too well the pain of sugar falling off from your skin and ruining your beautiful clothes and surroundings. "You belong here," Victoria said sharply, almost out of nowhere. Her porcelain facade, which was already chipped, was beginning to show cracks and threatening to smash completely. SJ looked up at the woman and then over at the door. The atmosphere was getting thicker with each moment he stayed in the room. Could he easily leave if he had to? SJ placed his untouched tea back down onto the table before him, thinking a little too noticeably. "You are a cake," Victoria claimed, slowly moving closer to the uncomfortable SJ. "I'm not a cake, I'm a donut," SJ announced in defence, causing Victoria to scoff. "If you live in my city," the woman drew out every word before pausing for dramatic effect. It was clear Victoria was someone who lived for dramatics. This was her performance, and she wasn't going to miss a beat. "You are a cake." She smiled with a heavy sense of faux warmth. "How does that make any sense? My name is Strawberry Jam Filled Doughnut." SJ stood up out of his chair, catching Victoria off guard, but she was quick to regain her composure. "I also have strawberry jam running through my body." "Doughnut?" The word donut came out of her mouth as a vicious growl. SJ wasn't sure if Victoria had even intended it to, which unnerved him to no end. What kind of person growls without realising? "See? We are the same inside." Victoria pointed to her hair, which was composed of cream stiffened to form a chignon at the nape of her neck. Within her hair, hints of strawberry jam could clearly be seen, as if it were her roots. It hadn't occurred to SJ until now, but Victoria was stunningly beautiful. Everything about her screamed elegance. Her neck and shoulders were accentuated by her gown, which sat just off the shoulder. The icing sugar that clung onto her skin looked almost deliberately placed, and it caused SJ to place a hand to his own cheek and take a glance at his own sugar. "See, Doughnut? We're the same." The woman placed her delicate hand under SJ's chin, tilting his head up to look her directly in the eyes. Those deep red eyes, which had previously looked demonic, now looked as if the jam within them was looking into SJ's jammy soul. "We aren't the same, Victoria," SJ said, shaking off the trance he had fallen into. Victoria stepped back in pure fury and raised her head like a baby crying for its mother. "God!" she screamed from the top of her lungs, sending a haunting echo to bounce around the room and possibly the entire mansion. A large, imposing being burst into the room. SJ had been expecting the guard who had stood by the mansion gates outside, refusing to let him enter until Victoria had been informed of his presence. He believed his name was Pound Cake, if memory of the short exchange served him well. This guard was completely different. Their skin was thick and cracked, giving off an intimidating demeanour. On their face, fruit stuck out like warts, which one current covering the left side of the upper lip. The dark 19th century guard's uniform that they wore had a couple of broken buttons on the chest from the sheer amount of muscle they were trying to contain. "Yes, ma'am?" the guard said in a surprisingly sweet feminine tone. "Rock, get this repulsive creature out of my face." Victoria pointed accusingly towards SJ, who was still trying to comprehend how much a being could exist with so much muscle. When he finally realised what was going on, he ran. He ran so quickly that he even caught the guard off guard, giving him a much-needed head start. SJ wasn't the fastest of runners, but he was good at hiding. It was the fear mixed with the sugar rush his inner jam gave him that got him as far as the garden, where he hid behind a large bush as Rock looked around for him, angrily. Victoria joined her guard shortly after and slapped her right across her strong, bold head, causing flakes of hard skin to fall to the ground. "Idiot!" Victoria cursed at the guard, who was rubbing her cheek after being slapped. "Tatty tattin!" Victoria screamed for her butler, who ran round the corner quickly before trying to regain his composure. "Yes, ma'am?" he stuttered, causing Victoria to roll her eyes and SJ to have to stifle a laugh, preparing to escape. "Tarty tattin," Victoria said, bending down to her short butler, pinching his gooey apple-covered cheek. She wiped off the sticky residue and continued in a much more frightening tone. "Wake my girls. They won't fail me." Thank you for listening to this chapter of A Doughnut from Cakeopia. If you enjoyed more, please consider subscribing. You can also follow me on Twitter. You can check out my website and that stuff. Also, the links to my Cash App and GoFundMe will be down below. All of that is listed down below. On Thursday, I will be releasing the short story based on Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. On Saturday, I will be releasing another chapter of A Doughnut from Cakeopia, chapter 3. And next Tuesday, I will be releasing the second part of my Under the Queer Umbrella series, M-Spec. Thank you for watching, donating, and subscribing and liking. And I can't wait to see you next time. Bye.